Pags, great to be with you. I'm doing terrific, enjoying a new year. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas, wonderful New Year.
I really did. Spent some time with the family. Kind of grew a beard. It's gone now, but I grew one for a few days.
Well, you and me both. I had it going right until New Year's Eve when Heidi made me shave it.
That's exactly what happened. Jenny said, yeah, that's not going to stick around. So glad to hang out with you again today. We just finished, I think, a very successful year legislatively. You guys got a lot done, although the media doesn't really tout your praise as much. You guys got a lot done. The left is going to say it was horrible, it was depressing, it was disgusting. Fact is, business is coming back. You pulled off what I think is the biggest legislation in 30 or 40 years in tax reform. Do me a favor, reflect on what you got done last year in 2017.
Well, I'm very encouraged. I think we saw major accomplishments in 2017. You know, I've said from the beginning the four big priorities are tax reform, regulatory reform, Obamacare, and judges. And if you look at that, we delivered in a big way on all four of those. Tax reform, the tax reform bill was historic. It is a tax cut for virtually every taxpayer in America. It is reducing taxes on small businesses, on farmers, on ranchers, on job producers. It benefits young people. It benefits parents. It benefits working men and women. It's designed to bring millions of jobs back to America, to raise wages. That was a major victory, and I was really encouraged Republicans were finally able to get our act together, come together, stand as one, and get it passed. That was a big deal. We also saw on reg reform that the administration has delivered, I think, in a very real way, lifting the burdens of regulations on small businesses, on job producers. That's benefiting Texas. That's bringing jobs back to Texas.
You know,
judges.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say on judges, we saw tremendous victories last year. We saw 12 judges for the federal courts of appeals confirmed. That's the most in the first year of a president's term in history. And we also saw Neil Gorsuch confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Two of those judges are here in Texas on the Fifth Circuit, strong constitutionalist conservatives. Those are big victories. And on Obamacare, we started to get the job done by repealing the individual mandate. It's not everything, but it's a big step in the right direction. And I fought very hard to get that done and was very pleased to end the year with a big victory there.
And that was a big tax cut for a lot of people. I think the number is 80% of those who were under the individual mandate and forced to either pay a fine or go and get health insurance are making $50,000 a year or less. I mean, this was a major tax for people who really couldn't afford the tax, so that was a great victory. When it comes to tax reform, you saw immediately, and again, it's Ted Cruz, Republican of the great state of Texas. We really enjoy hanging out with the senator. Immediately, companies started handing out money. AT&T, today Southwest Airlines announced it. You've got Fifth Third Bank and some other banks and other companies raising minimum wages. I mean, some people, up to 200,000 people, Ted, at AT&T are getting a check for $1,000 each. I mean, that's amazing. I don't know how you could argue with this being good legislation, knowing that real people, real taxpayers, real Americans got money in their pockets.
Right. No, look, that's exactly right. We're seeing businesses all over the country that are raising wages, that are giving bonuses, that are announcing major investment in new jobs and new factories and new production. All of that is good for the economic environment. And I think a couple of things are clear. One, just how radicalized Washington Democrats are, that they're not listening. Look, there are a lot of Democrats in Texas who are common sense conservatives. I'm talking about voters, regular people, who want to see jobs. And yet the Washington Democrats in the Senate are ignoring those Democrats back home who actually care about jobs. Every single Democrat in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, voted against cutting your taxes. Every single Democrat in Washington wants to raise your taxes. Yeah. And it's an amazing thing. And I do think the Democrats have overplayed their hands on this because their rhetoric is so extreme that they're telling people this is going to raise your taxes. Now, Pags, let me ask you something. It's a little nutty because they say on one hand, this is an irresponsible tax cut, and they say on the other hand, but it's raising your taxes. Now, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can't have both. Either it's a really big tax cut or it's raising your taxes, but it can't be doing both, and it's not. They're not telling the truth. And, you know, I'm reminded of in the Old Testament, there was a test for a prophet. If a prophet shows up, the people were told, have that prophet make a short-term prophecy. See if it comes true.
Yeah.
Well, the Democrats have told the whole country, your taxes are going to go up. I'm going to tell everyone listening to your show, in February, next month, take a look at your pay stub, pull it out, Compare it to your pay stub a year ago, last February, and for virtually every single taxpayer in the state of Texas, your taxes will be going down. This was designed to lower taxes on working men and women across the country.
U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican in the great state of Texas. Let's talk about Texas. We had the largest growth again last year out of any state. On average, 1,000 people move to Texas every day, Ted. 1,000 people a day. And they're coming from depressed, states like California and like,
Sure.
in the Rust Belt, like New York. They're coming here and they're settling down, but they're bringing their politics with them. What did you do last year specifically for Texas to ensure that the economy continues to boom here, that jobs continue to be available here, and that, for God's sakes, people moving here understand why it works so well?
Yeah. Look, you're right that Texas, the economy is booming. And it's booming because we understand a common sense proposition, which is you lower taxes, you lift regulations, you allow small businesses and job creators to create jobs, and the result is incredible prosperity. That's built the great state of Texas. Now, I was really encouraged last year in that I had 5 pieces of legislation pass into law, pass through the Senate, pass Congress, and be signed into law. Number one, the NASA Authorization Act. It was the first NASA Authorization Act in 7 years. I'll tell you, in Houston and Southeast Texas, there are tens of thousands of jobs that depend upon America leading the world in space and commercial space, and we had bipartisan cooperation to pass the NASA Authorization Act. Number two, passing major hurricane tax relief targeted at Hurricane Harvey. I joined with John Cornyn and Marco Rubio, and we passed the Cruz, Cornyn, and Rubio tax relief bill, which provided relief to families that were impacted by Harvey, to millions of Texans up and down the Gulf Coast. Number three, passed legislation directing the State Department to designate North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. They've done that now. That's an important step to standing up to the dangers of Kim Jong-un and a nuclear North Korea. Number four, it is passing legislation that I joined with Kevin Brady from Texas in doing, allowing states to condition unemployment benefits on passing a drug test. That passed. We rescinded an Obama regulation that was made no sense and was hurting jobs. And then number five was a big victory we had in the tax bill last month, which is an amendment I introduced to allow parents to use college 529 savings plans, tax advantage savings plans that you can save for college, to expand that so that you can also use it for K through 12 education, for public school, for private school, for parochial school, for religious school. It's the most far-reaching federal school choice legislation that has ever passed, and that passed the Senate, and the president signed it into law. So it was a big, big year for victories for parents and working men and women in the state of Texas.
Yet for some reason, Senator, you've got Beto O'Rourke and you've got Julian Castro we're hearing about. You've got all these lefty dorks who think that for some reason you're vulnerable. When you hear about that, what does it make you think? I know that you just go to work in Washington, you work your ass off, and you're getting a lot done for us. But when you hear these names, do you think about it much or no?
Well, look, there are Democrats who are Washington politicians, and they believe the answer to everything is more taxes, more regulation, more spending, and more debt. That doesn't work. And so right now, what are the Washington Democrats doing? They're voting no on everything. You ask them, should we cut taxes? They vote no. You ask them, should we fund our military? They vote no. You ask them, should we lift regulations? They vote no. Listen, that may make sense in Washington, D.C., but it doesn't make sense in Texas. It doesn't make sense in the oil fields of Texas. It doesn't make sense for the farmers of Texas. It doesn't make sense for the small businesses of Texas. We want Washington off our backs. And so, listen, but, politicians are going to behave like politicians. They're going to have lots of rhetoric, attacking the president, screaming like Chicken Little that the sky is falling. But my focus is on substance and results, and I think that's what Texans want, is substance, results, and we want jobs from cutting taxes and lifting regulations, and that's my focus.
What's interesting is it appears as though Washington, D.C. is finally paying attention to the way Texas has been doing it for a long time. And when you get rid of the regulation, when you start, imploring people to bring their businesses back by lowering taxes, when you get people back to work, suddenly, happy days are here again. And no matter what these haters say on the left, whether they're in the Senate or the House or they want to run against you in an election, you have real evidence to show, look what works, what you want to do doesn't.
That's exactly right. You take another example of common sense legislation, Kate's Law. I authored Kate's Law, introduced it in the Senate. Kate's Law was named, as you know, after Kate Steinle, beautiful young woman who was murdered by an illegal immigrant who'd come into this country over and over and over again. He's a repeat felon, had been in and out of jail. They kept letting him go. They kept letting him go. They kept letting him go. And he shot that poor young lady. She died in her father's arms. Her last words were, "Daddy, help me." That man never should have been on the streets. Kate's Law says if you're an aggravated felon, if you've entered the country repeatedly, you have a mandatory minimum prison sentence. He should have been in prison, and Kate Steinle would be alive. I've introduced that. Every single Democrat opposes it. Now that doesn't make any sense. That's just partisan nuttiness to oppose a common sense proposition that says aggravated felons who are illegal aliens, we ought to put them in prison and not let them free to endanger the lives of our families.
On that case, quickly, will he be seeing federal prison time because of the federal charges against him? It was nuts to see a California jury not allowed to look at the gun. They had to accept that it was an accident. He stepped on a Sig Sauer, which takes 10 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger on. I mean, he almost got off scot-free, but there are federal charges he faces now. Do you feel good like he's going to pay for this?
I don't know. I mean, I shared the same reaction that millions of Americans did to that jury verdict, which is it was astonishing and heartbreaking and infuriating. And I will say I was gratified to see the Department of Justice announce that they intended to pursue federal charges. We'll see what happens with those. And justice needs to be served in that case, and I hope the Justice Department pursues that and pursues that vigorously. I can tell you in terms of the Senate, my focus is on changing the policy so that the next young lady doesn't lose her life, so that we prevent this problem going forward. It's why Kate's Law matters so much. And every Senate Democrat, every House Democrat ought to be asked, why do you oppose Kate's Law? Why do you think we should be releasing violent felon illegal aliens? Because that's the position of the Democrats, and that's not a reasonable position where people can disagree as a matter of politics. That is an extreme, radical position, and it endangers people's lives.
You and I agree, my friend. Last question, and it's all the rage on social media. You and I love slapping people around on Twitter and stuff. That's all good fun, and I've learned to actually balance it out in my life and not take it too seriously. But trending everywhere, the top trending item is Steve Bannon calls it treason, hates Trump now, hates the Trump family. First, do you know Steve Bannon at all? And any thoughts about this dust-up today?
I know Steve Bannon well. Obviously, I know the president well. I work very closely with the president every day, have been working very hard to help the president and help every Republican deliver on our promises to the voters. There's a Twitter war going on right now. I have a standard rule of thumb. I don't comment on tweets. I don't comment on the political circus that is Washington, the battles between personalities. Right. I'll let other people worry about that. What I'm going to focus on is substance and results. Because I think Texans could care less about the nonsense, the back and forth, the backbiting, and the silliness that consumes Washington.
Agreed.
I think what Texans are interested in is we want more jobs, we want higher wages, we want more opportunity, and we want our constitutional rights, our right to keep and bear arms, our free speech, our religious liberty, our basic rights protected. So that's my focus, and I'll leave the silliness for other people to worry about.
Well, unless it's Alyssa Milano, then you let her have it. Ted, we always appreciate it. Happy New Year. Really glad to hang out with you again today. Let's talk again soon, sir.
Pags, always a pleasure. God bless.